It's funny the things that you take for granted when they're taken away from you.
Everything, seemed to be going really well in my life. I felt on top of my game.
I was 21. I was meeting all sorts of different people. I was dreaming of some important job in the fashion industry. Moving forward with my life and going on a certain career path. That was, what I dreamt to do. I had a group of friends. I had the energy to keep up with them.
It was just a few weeks after the birth of our son, Logan. He had spent a lot of time in the hospital. And we had a daughter, Ariel, too, who at the time was 4, now she's 14. I was probably at my most fittest level, physically speaking. I was going to the gym every day, working out for 2 hours at a time.
And I first started noticing I was falling asleep in certain classes, but then it became increasingly worse and worse, to the point where once I started working, every time I sat down, I would fall asleep.
During that December period, first symptom I noticed was actually really acute earache. I dismissed it as something which was probably going to pass. Not only did the symptoms not go away, but other symptoms started to manifest.
And just to kind of go over a little bit of what people with narcolepsy go through, there's 2 different types of narcolepsy. There's type 1, which is narcolepsy with cataplexy. Cataplexy is a sudden weakening of your muscles, and it could be all over or in certain parts of your body. And it usually coincides with a shift in your emotions. Sleep paralysis, hypnagogic hallucinations, auditory hallucinations, and for me, I would have these terrible, terrible nightmares.
Only Amy, who had been concerned all along, then forced me into the car and she took me to the emergency room, where I stumbled in at this point, unable to walk, talk or breathe properly. The head doctor of the hospital came to see me and suggested that what I had was really serious, to the point I believe he even said that I only have a couple of days left to live if I don't get a diagnosis and treatment quick enough. I was on the verge of kidney and lung failure. Fortunately for me, they were able to give me a really quick diagnosis. Granulomatosis with polyangiitis, let's just call it GPA for short.
I went through most of my 20s not even knowing really what was wrong with me, but I did do some searches and I did put together a few things because I was falling asleep when I was driving, because my knees were buckling when I was around people that I didn't like. I was dropping things and I was worried that there was something really wrong with me, and there was. And I would go to the doctor, and because I also have PCOS and had a weight problem, they would say that it was because of my weight or because I was depressed, not taking me seriously, to not really listen to what was wrong with me.
I was still dealing with some challenging emotions, just fear, feeling terrified. Those first 1 or 2 days where I just didn't know for sure if I was going to make it through any of this. It was just really hard for me to get my head around. I couldn't even begin to fathom the idea that not only was I told that I was running out of time potentially, but it might just be a couple of days.
It took the better part of 18 years for me to get a diagnosis. So you can imagine going through all of those years, knowing that there's something wrong with you, knowing that there are treatments out there, and not being able to have access to that.
The next concern was just how physically diminished I might be for the months and years to come, and recovering, trying to gain back some of the person who I used to be before all this started to happen. The issue wasn't about how long could I live, it was more about what kind of quality of life I would have ahead of me now. Well, I was extremely frail looking and just didn't recognize myself. I found that quite depressing, quite alarming. It was a very alienating period. I just didn't feel like myself anymore. I felt like I lost the person who I was.
Most of us spend our youth falling within a socially constructed narrative. You're supposed to follow a certain path. You're not going to follow everybody else's path. You are going to have to make your own path. It's entirely within your control how you go about doing that, which is the empowering part of it. You can write your own story, you can set your own trajectory, and that is really empowering, and that is very energizing and uplifting and motivating.
Created all this space for new things, new realizations and epiphanies, new ways of looking at the world. And one push-up became the new goal, and with that gave me new meaning. So during my time on long-term disability, I really began to understand how much pressure I'd been putting on myself with regard to my job and many other things which I just felt were important at the time. Buying whatever that money could buy, falling into a social narrative which I had been led to believe was normal, which I really thought there was no other way of living.
I think one of the biggest epiphanies that I've had in my illness journey, I realized that things only get better when you make them better. I spent almost 2 decades living my life according to somebody else's plan. And I think the realization that I don't have to do that has been the most empowering part of my illness journey.
Just realizing how much of that depended on being strong, the ability to motivate yourself, get up in the morning, be energized. My illness allowed me to do was realize that I didn't have to maintain that level of invulnerability at all times. I could afford to flounder, embrace a more fragile side of myself.
Living a healthy lifestyle and doing things that will benefit me on a mental, spiritual, and physical level. You got to meet yourself halfway. It's about modifying, abbreviating, and coming up with contingency plans in order to make the things happen that I want to happen.
With the limited amount of strength and energy I had, I decided to put some of those principles into practice and start learning about things, start engaging in certain activities bit by bit. I couldn't embrace some of those pastimes for very long, but over a period of time my strength did come back and I was able to learn a lot about physical fitness, wellness, recovery, as well as throwing myself back into the world of psychology. A lot of the study I did was heavily focused on people who were suffering from major and chronic illnesses, and how they navigate around that, how they find meaning, how they reinvent their personal narratives. That being the story that we tell ourselves about ourselves can do a lot, can say a lot when it comes to how well we deal with a challenge.
My journey to get a master's degree was reflecting upon my experience within the industry and how having narcolepsy really affected the way that I was perceived in work. That inspired me to pursue studies of inclusivity, but I think the key for me was how it's those things that make you part of the periphery instead of being truly included. There's still a really long way to go so that people who have talents, who have drive, who have passion, but may not have the health to complete things in this socially constructive way, but they still have those abilities to fulfill those job requirements. And that's been a driving force, is that I really want to see change happen.
Once you are able to maybe minimize some of your obligations and help yourself manage it, then find meaning in the things that you do decide to keep within your life. Find meaning within the challenge. It correlates an awful lot to finding the motivation to carry on and giving yourself a reason to live and enjoy life.
There's a big learning curve out there once you get a diagnosis, or even when you're searching for a diagnosis, when you're not feeling well and you can't explain it. The goal is to help as many people as possible who have chronic conditions manage their lives to the point where they can start feeling fulfilled, where they can achieve what they want to achieve, where they can derive meaning from their new story. So for us to be able to compile all of the different ideas, methodologies, interventions that we have firsthand experience with is the driving force behind what we're doing. That's why we're here.
In spite of what we're all going through physically, psychologically, we still have strengths. And it's about finding those strengths which can help us live fulfilled lives and give us purpose. And that everybody has potential. And that everybody can find purpose in something, no matter how physically limited they may be.